cousins and those kind of things. But every summer, my parents would ship my older brother and two younger sisters down the country. But what that did for me was, for a kid living in the city, East Baltimore, the grit and grind, it gave me a land-based experience. I mean, when I work with schools and kids, it's a knowledge young people have never walked on a dirt path. There's a lot of young people who've never stomped in a mud puddle. And I still like walking on dirt paths, and I can't pass up a mud puddle. There's something magical about stomping in mud puddles, because it's magical to me. When the sun hits it, you never know what's underneath of the murky waters. And so I would say that really kind of got me going with a land-based experience. But then my dad was a hunter and fisherman. And so we would fish on the eastern shore, on the bay. We would hunt in the Carolinas and Virginia. So I would really say that that is really where I got my orientation to the water. And so I would just say that that's how I caught the spirit of the Chesapeake, with my dad, hunting and fishing on the bay, outdoors living, and just family oriented. So that's kind of how I got started. And then that led to Blacks of the Chesapeake. And I'll talk more about that, but I'll put the baton over in Captain Lamont's hand at this point.
All right, I'm Captain Lamont Wright, and I reside in Graysonville. I was born and raised right on Kent Island. I moved away to DC at an early age, and then I stayed there for over 20 something years. And then I came back home to the Eastern Shore. Of course, I've been on the water all of my life because I'm a third generation captain. My grandfather was a waterman. My father was a waterman. And he used to get us up. Ever since I can remember, I was probably 5 years old. And I've been working on the water ever since. I mean, not fully, but I have been on the water since I was 5 years old, getting up and going out on the water since I was 5 years old. I've been taking care of myself since I was 12 years old, 13 years old, because he made us work, and we earned our own money, but we paid our way, paying rent at 14 years old, all until I put myself through, finish high school, everything. So I've been accustomed to it. I didn't like the water. It was so cold, because in the different seasons. So I left when I got old enough and got a land job. And after I retired, I came back. My father's still at it. And then I saw he was making a good way of living. So I came back to the water, and I end up purchasing my own boat after working with him for a few years. And I've had my boat, and it's off the hook. And it resides right on Kent Island, and I work it out of the Wells Cove area in the Kent Narrows area. And that's where I leave from, where the Jetty restaurant is, seven days a week in the summertime. So I I'm a charter boat, 100-ton captain, licensed captain. I am currently employing so many different young people, that including all of my sons. They all work. My daughters go out too, but they don't work. They just like to hang out, hang out on the boat, But all of my kids, I've had 6 or 7 kids out on the boat at one time. Of course, I have a lot of kids, so I ain't gonna tell you the number, but I do have a lot of kids. But at the same time, they all love the water, and I mean, we have a very good time, and they all help me. But I'm trying to get some of them to get their captain's license. I do have a son now, is in class as we speak, and he's gonna he was starting to take his captain's test, and he had an emergency, and then he had to stop. Now he's back at it, and he's gonna get his captain's license soon. But at the same time, I've been doing this all my life, and I love the water. It's just something that my father, he just instilled it in me, and then I came back to it, and now I love it because it's just the summertime, not in the winter like when I was hating it. But I enjoy it. I'm still at it, and I'm also trying to mentor a lot of the youth, to give them jobs, and I do employ some young kids, 13, 14, 15, 16, and of course my sons, but I give them all an opportunity to get the water experience. And so I'll continue on what my legacy is and what I'm trying to do after, we get back to it and maybe some questions and answers.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys said a lot of really great things, even though I already kind of knew all this stuff. It's always great to hear it again, because I feel like I see so many similarities in our stories, even though we are from different generations. I'm not saying y'all are old, more seasoned than me, I will say. But, like with Lamont, leaving and then coming back, I think that was something in my story, in my journey of, just finding what I wanted to do, that was like really critical for me. When I was growing up, I kind of there was two things that, or actually three things that like I really was looking for when I was looking, for colleges and kind of my next step out of high school. One was that it had to be at least 4+ hours away from home. 2, it could not be in the state of Maryland. And 3, it had to, of course, have a good lacrosse program, because that's, what I was also doing in college. But I kind of made this like ridiculous vow to myself that I was never going to come back to the shore, that I was like, this is it. There's nothing for me here or anything like that. And I think that a lot of Eastern Shore kids, when I was growing up, that was kind of the mentality of like, there's nothing in this small town for you. So like, go out and find what you want to do. And with you, Lamont, I think that just sort of being in the space, not, kind of being in the space, but being from East Baltimore, but also kind of having that like country style, I see a lot of similarities just in my family, because none of my family, is really into the water. In my immediate family, they're lawyers. My mom is a retired parole officer in Queen Anne's County. My dad is a clinical nurse. So when I kind of came out and was like, oh, I want to, work in the environment, work on the water, they were like, okay, like, where is this coming from? Like, okay. But it sort of just all kind of came together. And, now it really is like, I'm bringing our family kind of back to a space, because I have 200 years of, just of legacy before me, that were on the water. So you kind of covered what age you guys were when you started, really interacting with the water. But, what was kind of like the deciding factor for you guys? I know for me, it was, I really just kind of felt this, kind of unknowing pull to the water and to all things environmental. So was that like similar for you guys, or was that, something that you just, like you said, kind of saw when you were growing up and that your dads were involved in, and so you just kind of fell into it? Lamont, I'll let you go first.
Okay, so with me, when I moved back to the Eastern Shore, it was like my dad was still at it, and I would go out with him and help him out on the boat, got my experience, and then I got my captain's license in 1998. And then, so I just started working with him, and then I'm going to retire soon. I'm going to retire soon. So I just kept working with him. And then every year for the past 10 years, he's going to retire next year. That's when I kind of ventured out and got my own boat. And then after 10 years of him saying that, and I got my own boat, and now 15, 20 years later, he's still going to retire next year, one more year. So he kind of drew me and seeing that the way of life and the hard work and just meeting the people. You got people from New York, from New Jersey, from Philadelphia, from DC, from Virginia. I mean, people come very, very far to go fishing on a daily basis. And besides that, I have so many real good friends from just meeting them on the boat, that I go to Philadelphia often and meet some of my friends, just go for lunch. I've been to Philadelphia to some of the lodges and some of the people that have supported us as far as coming fishing. And, my father and I both, he's still active to this day, with fishing. And we both just support people back, church groups. I've been to churches in DC. I've been to church groups that, we've taken out, so he kind of inspired me. And then the people just drew me in, because I'm a people person. And I mean, I just, just a gift of God that I just deal with the people. So I have thousands of friends and people just call me daily, which in the end, it do get to you sometimes. So that's why I say this is not for everybody, because your phone's going to ring probably 500 times a day, but that's part of the business if you want to be in it. But I love it at the same time. It drives me nuts, but, but again, I love what I'm doing. And I kind of took from him, so, but he's still at it. So I'm going to push him to do as long as he wants to, because I feel that if he stopped now, what will he do? He go crazy probably. So I don't want that. So 20 years later, he's still 1 year at a time. I'm gonna retire next year. I'm bringing my son up, and pretty soon we're gonna retire him.
Okay.
Let him sit.
That's
So
so
that's
funny.
kind of what got me into, he got me into it after the fact that I was hating it when I was younger.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah.
That's awesome. All right, Vince.
And what I say with my story is that I have worked 45 consecutive years, K-16 education. That I grew up in Baltimore. I went to Morgan University, and my academic training is in urban planning and community development. And so I started working in Baltimore schools as a planner, and then got recruited to Anne Arundel County in the early 1980s, again as a planner, and have run a couple of multi-million-dollar housing agencies, assisted housing, affordable housing, public housing, and worked with Maryland Department of DNR for 10 years. And so all of that together, and what I would say in the early 80s, is when I really started the Blacks of the Chesapeake as a project. That what I had found is that if you go to any library, college, or university and pick up books on the Chesapeake Bay, very seldom you would see people of color. Mm-hmm. If they were depicted, the caption would say crab picker and oyster shucker. No name, no attribution, no nothing. You flip the page. If it's a white waterman, it say who his mama was, who his daddy was, or what did he used to do, what he gonna do tomorrow. And we flip the next picture, it says crab picker and oyster shucker. And so at that time, I was president of the Anne Arundel County Board of Education. And so rather than complain about what the system have and what the man is doing or not doing, I said that if I think that our story should be told, stop complaining and get the gathering and writing. And so started a lot of the people that my dad knew, because we would come down to Kent Narrows and fish with Meredith and Wright and Lamont's Uncle Andrew and George Roy and all of those guys. They worked in Baltimore, Bethlehem Steel, Continental Can Company, Post Office. And so I saw Black captains. And so when people just try to tell me, well, yeah, y'all guys was the helpers, you weren't the captains, you weren't the owners, Black guys was helpers. I said, no, I know Black captains. I've seen Black captains. I've been on Black captains' boats. And so I began to interview the guys and girls and began to write and develop curriculum guides, and they're currently used throughout schools throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. And what I would say is, even on these various jobs, that each one, if they didn't support the work I was doing with Blacks of the Chesapeake, they tolerated the work. Mm-hmm. And this is what I find, Imani and Captain Wright, we always have these discussions about how do we get more people engaged. What I would say is that the average person, has the work, have a limited amount of leisure time, a leisure amount of expendable income, life kicks in. But I'm just fortunate for over 30 years, every day I woke up, I've done something to move Blacks of the Chesapeake forward. But without having jobs that I said accommodated it, every now and then they would pull me in the office and say, Leggett, if you spent as much attention on DNR or the Board of Education as you do on Blacks of the Chesapeake, you would be much further along. And I would say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. Calm down for a minute, but then I'm back out on it again. And again, just caught the passion. But what it also did was many of the African Americans I ran into were so glad that somebody came by that looked like them,
Right.
that wanted to hear their story and hear their backstory. So often they just talk about people want to come up to the captains or the women and put a quarter in their ear like it's a jukebox, put a camera in their face and push a button and say, stop talking or start talking.
Right.
But, you know, I was interested in the backstory. I wanted to hear your disappointments, your aspirations, your hopes. And so that is really what got me further and further engaged, because many of the individuals were 70 years old 30 years ago.
Right.
And this is a conversation that Captain Lamont and myself have about the vanishing watermen.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we've had those conversations too, where because, you know, for my research for my master's degree, I'm looking at the historic African American, you know, involvement and engagement on the Chesapeake Bay fisheries specifically. And so, you know, just I think it was you talking with you guys, I didn't realize how many Black captains and Black watermen we really had. And at one point in time, we had over 900, and now we only have 9, right? And they're all over the age of 60. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to me that we've gone from covering over most of like 90% of the commercial fishing industry in the Chesapeake Bay to kind of being non-existent, where people are kind of seeing us as like this unicorn of Chesapeake Bay history and not as, you know, major contributors of the Chesapeake Bay history. So what has that kind of done for you guys as you guys have kind of gone through your careers, building Blacks of the Chesapeake, you know, working with your dad, Lamont, and building your own, you know, charter business too? Over those years, I'm sure you guys have seen many of your, you know, Black colleagues and fellow Black watermen and boat captains leaving the industry. Has there, in those conversations that you've had, has there been a kind of a centralized focal point of what was the reason why they were leaving in the first place, and kind of what were some of the setbacks and obstacles and barriers that like these Black boat captains had to go through?
Well, for me, I could tell you that during my time on the water, when I can remember back, just the oystermen, the crabbers, all of that, I can remember just unfair labor. I mean, labor wages. I can remember that, say, for instance, when I first started being a scuba diver in 1980, I used to dive for oysters with my father. And I can distinctly remember that we would get $7 a bushel and they would get $8 a bushel. Not saying the reasons why, but it's a fact.
This is the conversation to say the reasons why, or at least why you think.
It's a fact that because we were Black, we were getting cheated out of our money doing the exact same thing, you know? So, you know, that kind of disturbed me. But at the same time, we had to keep pushing. If you wanted to work and you wanted to keep your market, and what they would do, if you complain about it, they would say, we don't have market tomorrow. What that means is you don't go to work tomorrow and bring me 50 bushels of oysters because we don't need them. And they needed them, but that was their way of punishment. If you complain about it, you either take it or you leave it.
Right.
And, you know, so that right there was kind of disturbing for me, you know, to see that I saw this during my time. And I mean, it's so what it done for me is just, and that got a lot of the Blacks out of the business because they weren't getting treated fair. The same way in the oyster shuckers in the house, they weren't getting paid the exact same thing as anybody else, you know? So I saw the decline in the Black watermen. That they wasn't getting treated. They wasn't getting the same price per bushel. They weren't, and it was really disturbing. And then a lot of them just started trying to get land jobs because they didn't get the market. And when I say they didn't get the market, that means that there's no work tomorrow because I don't need your 5 bushel of crabs when they needed them all the time. But that was their way of punishment. So they kind of forced us out of the business. But, you know, then we turned to fishing. And there was no way they could force us out of that because we were our own boss then. And we had our own rules and regulations then. And that's when, you know, my father changed from clamming and oystering to strictly fishing. So now we're charter boat captains that we take people fishing and we charge a fee, but they don't, no one has control over that anymore. You know, we have control over that. So, but at the same time, to get in the fishing industry, the fishing business costs a lot of money.
Right.
A fishing vessel right now, the cheapest fishing vessel, probably $125,000 to even get in the business, to even get started. And that's a cheap one. Now,
That's
if
a
you're going to
house.
take a 6-pack boat, you know, some of them got some boats that cost a lot less, but they're not making the money. But if you want a charter boat that carry 25 to 30 people, you're going to pay for it because there's so many Coast Guard restrictions and regulations and things that you got to have. Just the life jackets alone is $60 a piece and you need 30 of them. Or if you got a boat that carry 49 people, you need 50 of them. Plus you got to have child life jackets. I mean, to get in that business, a life raft, $3,000. I mean, it costs a lot of money to even get in the business. So a lot of them didn't have the accessibility to get money to acquire these boats and to do these things. So that forced a lot of them out. Unfortunately, my father was able to rob Peter, pay Paul, and he made a way. And that was very, you know, inspiring to me to continue to do the things. I worked with him. I saved my money. I did everything I could do. And then I ended up obtaining my own boat. And then I got into business. But the decline is still going down. When I first started, there were over 30 Black commercial fishing captains.
Mhm.
Right now, it's 9 of us, and the youngest is right at 60 years old. There are three to four guys that crab off and on, but they just don't have the market. And the youngest, matter of fact, he just had a stroke the other day, and he's not even 50 years old. He had a stroke. Now he may not be able to even crab or be a waterman again. And that's all he talked about in the hospital. My boat, my boat, my boat. Instead of thinking about getting well, his whole right side is right now. They thinking with therapy, he may be okay. But I'm just saying the decline in it is so bad that if something's not done, just think in 10 years, I'll be close to 75 years old.
Right.
What am I going to do? There's my father's 82 years old. He's the oldest Black waterman that I know of in
Right.
Maryland right now that's still active doing this. So what's going to happen 10 years from now if we don't do something?
Right.
So I had this great idea of if somebody don't do something now, it's going to just disappear. There'll be no more Black watermen. There'll be nothing. So I had this great idea. Let me start finding a way so I can get some of the young Black youth back on the water.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. I'll guarantee you that. So I started just asking youth, do you want to go out on a boat? Do you want to work? Do you want to work? And then I started sponsoring out of my own pocket to pay for these kids to go to school to obtain their captain license. And of course, they need sea time and they need to work on a boat lots and lots and lots of hours. So I give them jobs, I pay them, and I pay their way to go to school to obtain their captain license just so the legacy can continue, you know? So it's been a struggle to get them to continue to do this because, like I said, it's a long day. You're 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And on weekends, you go out sometimes 2 times on Fridays, 2 times Saturdays, sometimes 2 times Sundays. You're making at least 10 trips a week. And it's not for everybody. But at the same time, it's a way of living it's a game changer. It could change your whole life if you get into this business. Now, after they get their captain's license, I'm not sure what's going to happen and how they're going to obtain a boat. But at the same time, I just want to see them just one step at a time.
Right.
God knows what may happen. We may end up with something, but what we're trying to do right now, we may end up with something and find a way that there'll be money for boats. There'll be money for other things to get them started. So this has been a vision of mine, to try to keep this thing going, because I can see the decline, and I can see if something's not done now. And I am so thankful for you and for Vince as we collaborate and come together to try to make a difference in this industry right now.
Yeah.
I am. I'm glad that I met you guys, and I'm so super excited every time I talk to both of you guys, and just try to continue to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That was beautiful. And I enjoy working with you as well. Vince, follow that great kind of, overview of just kind of what were some of the obstacles and stuff. But you were like, kind of like Lamont, but you were like on the ground when you were doing your book, The Chesapeake Through Ebony Eyes, doing all of the, interviews and things like that. What were some of the things that you were kind of hearing were kind of the central points?
Well, this is one thing I would say with the Blacks of the Chesapeake and the approach that I've taken is something I've been doing for 30 years. And many of mentors, Captain Earl White from out of Deal Island was an oysterman, for 60 years. Just a lot of the men and women that I've met over the years, and even with Earl White at 60 years as oysterman, I mean, we had commissioned him an Admiral of the Chesapeake on his 80th birthday. Captain he was 91. Wow. He got commissioned. But the counterparts, there are 100 and some Admirals of the Chesapeake, and it didn't have to be a waterman. Brooks Robinson, Hall of Fame baseball player, was an Admiral of the Chesapeake. They had a scientist named Mrs. Burkhart when the Festeria hit from the University of North Carolina. Governor named her Admiral of the Chesapeake. Gary Johnson, ESPN sailing commentators, Admiral of the Chesapeake. So they come from all walks of life. And even myself as an Admiral of the Chesapeake in 2003 for bringing to light the contributions of Black watermen. And this is what I would say is that I've had an opportunity not only to take a long view, 30 years, but I'll use another analogy. I was also able to get up 30,000 feet up in the air and look at the entire watershed. What I found from African Americans and from majority people on the Bay, life have restricted you to your cove and your creek. Mm-hmm. Nobody had time or money to go one creek over, one road over, because they didn't have the dollars or the resources. Right. Historically, you had to work in the counties that you lived in. Mm-hmm. And so there was a time that if you were living in Queen Anne's County, you worked the Queen Anne's County waterways. If you were in Anne Arundel, you worked the Anne Arundel waterways. But as other people's fishing grounds got over-harvested, people was coming down from Connecticut, New York, when they burnt out their oyster grounds, they came on the Chesapeake Bay, people down on the lower shore of Virginia and Maryland started migrating up the bay. But when it was county-based, I mean, over in Anne Arundel County, there was a Black man who was president of the Anne Arundel County Watermen's Association in the 50s and 60s, because there were so many Black watermen over there. When they had the election, their guy won. Even over in Queen Anne's, Captain Butler and guys like that, school board vice president, school board members of the Watermen's Association, officers. But then once you could go anywhere on the bay, that changed the dynamics. And so what I try to contribute to the conversation, even when you just talked about how many watermen were in Kent Narrows, how many watermen were in Crisfield and Bellevue and Cambridge and Annapolis and Baltimore and Anacostia River, Virginia. So it's really a much broader story. And what I find is people speak to their sector. Mm-hmm. but there is a broader story out there. And even when people make the statement that African Americans have been the backbone of the maritime and seafood industry, and people look at what goes on in their little creek or their little part of the bay and say, I don't get it, I don't believe it, I don't think so, they haven't looked bay-wide. It's the cumulative impact of our work that I stand on the fact that we were the backbone of the maritime and seafood industry on the Chesapeake Bay from the time of enslavement. 1619 was the gateway, and they were after tobacco and seafood, the bounty of the bay, the largest estuary in North America. And that is how so much generational wealth got created in the Mid-Atlantic region. But African Americans did not get a chance to partake in that on an even level. I heard Captain Lamont, I've heard stories where they say no market. The guys say they would dump the oysters back in the river rather than sell them for $1 a pound. And we'll see what the market is tomorrow because I already harvested them. They'll hide them back in the water. And when the market gets better, they know where they dropped them at.
Right.
Again, I'm verifying, points that you're making from a bay-wide perspective, talking with tens and hundreds of watermen throughout the region.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like every time I talk to you both, like I learned so much from just hearing about your stories, which I know is one of the reasons why I really cherish the relationships that we're building together and that all the things that we collaborate on. Because, when I was, sort of reading about just African Americans on the Chesapeake Bay, the first thing that I kind of came across was in the Jim Crow era, all the laws and regulations that came about kind of prohibiting Blacks from being boat captains, from being out on the water, from working out on the water. And it went all the way to the extent of that they were even fining white captains because white captains would then hire Black watermen to work on their boats because they knew that they were good workers. They knew what they were doing. And it even got to the point where white watermen were getting, going through the risk of having their, harvest taken away or getting fined for the day or even getting their boats and vessels taken away, which is insane to me that the commercial fishing was really, the foundation of it was really built around kind of excluding African Americans, even though we were actively trying to go through those barriers and obstacles. I think that's a lot of, kind of similarities of what we're seeing in the lack of diversity now in marine science is those lack of resources, that lack of support, that lack of just investment. And why we're not really seeing a lot of, of the younger generations getting into, marine occupations and just, the science fields in general. And I think that it's just super important that we bring all of this to light, which is why I'm so glad that you guys are being honest about the things that you guys have experienced. Is no matter how traumatic it may be, these are the things that are going to be really important in pushing this forward because these are facts. Like these are the firsthand accounts that we're missing from the dialogue just in general. For those of you who don't know, Vince has written multiple books, but one of the books that I have in my hand right now is the Chesapeake Bay Through Ebony Eyes. It is a very, very good read, a very easy read, but it has a lot of pictures and just a lot of just notice and documentation of the African Americans that were on the Bay and the ones that he interviewed. And I think that when I was reading that, I really got a sense of, like you were saying, Vince, that you were really looking at the bigger picture of the Bay, not just your creek or, your area. And I think that once we start doing that, like you said, we can really see the overall contribution that African Americans have had. So yeah, just moving forward from that, we keep talking about, legacy and generations. And those are, some of the things that have been coming up in your responses. And Lamont, you touched on a little bit about this dream that you had about, you know, helping the younger generation, getting their captain's license, showing them the way, kind of like your father did, and all the other ones that you interacted with. And so then for those, you know, those on the call that don't know, that was kind of last year, I believe, in February. So, or this year, or this month, last year, Vince had a whole talk, his own talk about Blacks on the Chesapeake. And Lamont was on the call, and I remember I was so excited. I had just gotten, you know, back from, you know, trying to do some things in New York with aquaculture, and was really trying to rebuild MIA to what it is now. And I hopped on the call. I was super nervous. I don't know if you know this, Vince, so I'm just going to call myself out now. But I was super nervous because I had read so much about you. I had just been admiring all the things that you had done. And I was like, oh my God, I hope he calls on me. And I remember I asked you this question, and I was like, where, you keep talking about the men that are on the water. Where are the women at? Like, what have they been doing? What were they doing? Give me a name of a woman that was actually a waterman, you know, not in the seafood houses and the packing houses. Not that that sector of women of color is not important, but I think that when I look at it, and just as, you know, our commercial fishing moves forward, I really start to think of, you know, where were the women? What were they kind of doing in this? So can you kind of touch on that, Vince, a little bit? And then I'll go to kind of what Lamont was talking about. But were there actual women that were on the water, that had their captain's license, that were operating boats, that were in the harvesting and all of that?
Well, I'll say one thing, and Captain Lamont can come in, that even when we just talk about captains on the bay,
Mhm.
I mean, what I heard Captain Lamont say, he's a Coast Guard certified 100-ton captain.
Right.
I got uncles, cousins, and brothers got a little putt-putt, and if you in charge of the putt-putt, you are the captain.
Right.
And so one of the things that we have to realize is that you may be the captain of your boat, but there's different tiers, different tonnage, different rules of the road. And so I think when people try to minimize whether we were in charge and had our own boats, when they start talking about Coast Guard certified, what's your tonnage, where you went to school at. But again, with limited resources, life experiences, whether you are a captain or a musician, you didn't have to go to Peabody, but you blind and been playing since you're 3. Does that take away from what you are and what you know? Because so often when I'm out trying to get resources to support Blacks of the Chesapeake, when people start counting on your finger, well, Vince, it ain't but 8 of them, and you want $1 million. And so, you know, that's $400,000 a piece. What you gonna do with it? And I said, whoa. Don't start counting heads.
Right.
Because, and in the African-American community, y'all can disagree if you want, the woman is the CEO in our households. I mean, we go down to the American Legion and talk bad, but the African-American woman is the CEO. If you don't know, you better ask somebody. Because early on in my lectures, the ladies got up and say, Vince, what about us?
Right.
That we were out there with our husbands shoveling snow off the washboard. We were on the culling board. If he was out there tonging, we were on the tiller. We worked all day, and then him and myself went to the packing house after being on the water all day.
Right.
Captain Lamont just mentioned earlier this week, one of our licensed captains, Captain Joyce Pace and Vera Meredith, and they are licensed, schooled female captains out there. And so I think that we just shouldn't get ourselves trapped in a corner.
Right.
And also, I'm a member of the Seafarers Yacht Club, Washington, D.C., Seafarers Yacht Club, Baltimore. So we are on sailboats, power boats, mega yachts. So I think it's all African Americans in the maritime industries,
Right.
but we're building upon the log canoes and the dugout canoes, and where it all started up up here with the fancy boats like Captain Wright and his buddies have. I mean, they got the pretty boy boats out there, but you got some dock next to them. If you got an ice pick and stick it, should have left the dock. So I think we shouldn't get trapped in people trying to microcosm us into titles, but we're speaking broader.
Right.
And we even have African Americans that are bay pilots. That when you see these tankers going up and down the bay, that anytime a foreign flag comes through Cape Henry or Cape Charles or down the C&D Canal, and an American Maryland pilot has to get on that boat and guide it into the harbor. We got some young brothers out there with tweed jackets, suede patches, smoking a pipe, crawling up the rope, making 300 grand a year. So when we talk about careers, we need to cast the broadest picture. And so it may be a kid that starts out with Captain Lamont and say, well, Captain Lamont, I think I want to be a bay pilot. And we could bring a bay pilot, a young brother, to the meeting. Talk about STEM and STEAM and science and mathematics and engineering. You know what kind of skills you need to bring one of them boats coming from Toyota, Domino Sugar, McCormick Spice up that bay. I mean, so it's a whole field. We're trying to introduce them to careers and let them find their own path.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so just to continue on with the story for those of you who don't know, so we all kind of, met last year in February, like I was saying before, during Vince's talk. And I, asked this question about women of color on the Bay. And then, Lamont started talking just about, the legacy and kind of what he was trying to do and things like that. And that he was trying to get younger Black people their captain's license, and that, he was getting a list together and things like that. And at the time when I had a lot more availability and wasn't doing 150,000 things, I was like, absolutely, that's what I want to do. That's the next thing. I want to be the youngest, Black woman boat captain on the Chesapeake Bay. And I want to do it through Lamont because, who else to, better to kind of go through that with. And, we had a call and we talked. And he was saying, like he kind of said today, that he was paying for these captain's courses out of his pocket. And again, this was like right in, February of 2021. So Minorities in Aquaculture had a little bit of, recognition on the Eastern Shore. And I was like, Lamont, like, I think this is great, but I don't think that you need to take your money like out and do that again. And of course, for him, it wasn't about that. But because I had seen all the opportunities in this new kind of stage of my career and how people wanted to really kind of work with, African Americans and, minorities in aquaculture specifically to create these opportunities, I was like, Lamont, I think we can do it. And so we, it was a couple of days later, and I got a call from Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and I used to work for them being an intern in 2016. And so my boss calls me and she's like, hey, so we saw this article that came out about what you're trying to do. And we saw that you're trying to be a boat captain. So Chesapeake Bay Foundation wants to pay for your captain's license. And of course I was like, what is happening? Like, okay, like I was stunned. And I got off of that call and the first thing I thought about was like, well, dang, I just talked to Lamont about how I wanted to do it with him. And then I thought about the legacy and the generations and the heritage of like what that would mean for me to do, to do it with Lamont. So I got on a call back with Chesapeake Bay Foundation and I said, okay, I'm gonna go a little bit out on a limb. And, I had never kind of done this in a forum before where I felt like I had, the kind of the guts to say this, but I said, you guys, Chesapeake Bay Foundation specifically has been talking about how they want to promote diversity and inclusion, do all this stuff. And I really appreciate that, you guys want to pay for my captain's license and give me access to your vessels. But I'm kind of going to ask you to put your money where your mouth is, because I have a better idea where we can kind of do this for the long term, not just for right now. Because it's not about me being the youngest Black woman on the Bay, even though that'd be super cool. But when I really listened to Lamont's vision and dream for this, I was like, we could do this. So now, officially, we are all in collaboration. We're carrying out Lamont's dream right now to get young Black kids on to the water. with their captain's license, with all three of us a part of that experience. And that has really changed the game, I think, for us as we move forward, because you can really see the different generations that are a part of this and how it really is not just something that you guys, because you guys were experiencing firsthand, but this is something that really resonated to me and my generation. And so I'm just super grateful that we're able to work together, but also super grateful that we're able to help you, Lamont, really carry out this dream, because we're coming up with some really exciting things that I can't wait for people to see. I can't wait for us to launch. We won't get too much into that because we don't want to spoil it. But if anybody wants to kind of see a little bit more about what we're trying to do, I will drop our, we had a story come out from USA 9, CBS. And so I'll put that in the chat. You guys can check out that story. That was a really cool time. So before we wrap up and get to Q&A, I want to ask you guys one last question. What was your, if you want to share, either a thing that you like about that you love about the Bay, one or a few things that you love about the Bay, or a specific memory that you have that really has resonated with you and kind of, stuck with you throughout your years of working on the Bay. Lamont, I'll let you go first.
Well, with me, the people, just meeting the people and being with the people every day. And like I said, some of my closest friends, you meet out on the boat, and it's just the people. I love being out there, and I have so many memories of some of my friends. It's just like, I had this one friend of mine, it was a group of guys, and they had all started out like drug dealers, drug addicts, all of that, and out of Baltimore. And all of the guys got their stuff together. They got clean, and they used to come on a boat every Monday. No, yes, every Monday, because they own barbershops and all of that now. So barbershops are closed on Monday, and they used to come every Monday, and it was like 12 of them. So every Monday all summer, all 12 of these guys would come fishing. These were the most funniest guys ever. If you ever was on a boat with them, you would just, you almost need to wear a pamper or something. You know what I mean? They were so funny. And that's one of my fondest memories. And the sad thing about it, the one that really started this thing, named Ronnie Bell, he passed away. So it kind of dissolved. And now it's down to like 5 of them, and they'll come maybe once or twice a year. But that's a memory that I grew close relationships. And these guys call me like almost every week. Hey, just checking in on you. I heard it's a bad storm over there. Is everything good? Or if it's snow or anything, these are true friends. And this is one of the better memories I had from being on that water, just how people just take to you. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So these are good friends of mine that, matter of fact, I just saw one the other day, but these are good friends of mine that's one of my better memories of being out there, period, of all my years on the water, just that group of guys.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's so great. And Vince, yours?
And I guess for me, in 2000, I started the Chesapeake in 1984, 85, and in 2000, the Library of Congress designated the Blacks of the Chesapeake as a local legacy project for bringing to light a little-known aspect of Americana. Mm-hmm. So to get the Library of Congress and the U.S. Congress stamp on Blacks of the Chesapeake, I don't argue with people anymore. Go call the Library of Congress. I just put a hard check on them. I don't have to justify who I am and what I do. Here's the number to the Library of Congress. The other thing is, in 2003, when the government commissioned me an Admiral of the Chesapeake Bay, but what I'm more proud of, according to the Department of Legislative Reference, this is a major department in the State House, there have been about 101 or 102 Admirals of the Chesapeake Bay. 5 of them have been named Admiral of the Chesapeake, and include myself, but 3 of them are people that I nominated. Blacks of the Chesapeake nominated, because the system is not out looking for us.
Right.
There's no rat patrol out there trying to say, with a clipboard, let me go find some worthy candidates. No,
Right.
we have to be our own champions. And so one was 80 years old, another one was 79, another one was 91. And so I'm glad I have the desire, and you have to write them up and push them. And if somebody did something in the 4th grade and they want to try to say this or say that, but you just keep pushing and keep pushing, because we need to find our own heroes. Right. We need to identify our own pioneers. Right. Because heretofore, the system has not done that for us. And so I just find that so empowering. I work with Captain Lamont and his dad when we put together a documentary film, Black Captains of the Chesapeake Bay. We've done documentary story quilts on Black watermen. So again, but it's building off those steps, because this is what I like working with you and Captain Wright, that we can tell a broader story with authenticity. And so that's what replenishes my soul, because I get more no's than yeses in my business. I get more no's than yeses. Yeah. No matter how successful I might appear, I get a whole bunch of no's. But it's time with folks like you that just, come on, Vince, get back in the game. Y'all sponge me off and push me back in and say, come on, champ, you can take them. And that's what we have to do, encourage each other, because we are pushing against a history and system that not only ignored our story, but erased our story. And let me say that again. Not only was the Black men and women on the Chesapeake Bays ignored, many times we were on the boats and got erased off of the boat. And so if it's up to us, as the African proverb said, that as long as the hunter is telling the story, the lion will always be a killer. But when the lion gets the chance to tell the story, we're going to hear the truth. And thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, as we just kind of wrap this up, I just want to say thank you both so much for just all of your just encouragement and support, with everything that I'm trying to do on the Bay. And I look up to you both so much, and I've just really cherished the relationship and just the work that we get to do together. I think, Vince, you feel like we're kind of pushing you back in. I feel like you guys are really giving me a reason to stay, and like really validating all of the things that sort of Minorities in Aquaculture is trying to do. So I really appreciate both of you. I wanted to end, before we get to our Q&A, I wanted to kind of end our little part of the session with reading a poem called Resume of a Waterman that is in the book, The Chesapeake Through Ebony Eyes. I'm only gonna read part of it because I felt like this part of it was like really great when I was reading it. So, can you examine a waterman, down on his knees calling oysters? He works unseen to the eyes of most men. He lives in a world beyond sharp corners, cluttered desks, stiff chairs, and computers. It is a place where God is more clearly seen as an artist. For every man who sees a blackboard and walls as a classroom, he represents the men who see a sea, a lake, a river, or a bay as its very own oasis, overflowing with lessons. It is an estuary of teaching, studying, and life-saving prayers, a place of refuge and harmony with the Creator, abundantly giving and abundantly receiving. He is called a teacher and a friend, a discipline and a leader. In searching for little treasures, he has given his blood and sweat. His work is baptized with hope and determination and desire. I literally got chills when I read that poem. I was like, when you are out on the water, there's like, you really feel like there's no words that can describe how you feel until you read those words or until you find those words. And I really felt like that poem just spoke so, just so highly of just everything that I feel out on the water. And so I just wanted to share that because if anybody is interested in getting this book, you definitely should. I will put a link to both Blacks of the Chesapeake and Off the Hook fishing charters in the chat. But for now, we have about 15 or so minutes. If anybody has any questions for either Vince or Lamont or myself, we can kind of get into that. I'm checking the chat. And okay. Megan, hi, thank you for being here. Megan said, thank you for sharing your experiences, incredibly eye-opening and inspiring. How can people who are not in the industry support Black fishermen on the Chesapeake Bay and beyond? Also, Admiral Leggett, where can we locate your educational literature? Thank you.
Well, one thing I would say is thank you. Melanie Redding, she has worked with me for 20 years. She was a student of mine at Anne Arundel Community College, wrote that poem, Resume of a Waterman. And what I would say is that through our website, you can reach out to us. Our books are on Etsy. It's our store. So again, we'll put our websites up on the chat, and I would love to chat with you more about our books, our curriculum guides, and our youth programs that we run as well. So that will be a good place to start. Thank you.
All right, and I'm putting all of the information in the chat right now. And thank you so much, Mary Ella, for putting the book link as well already. You have, Vince, you've got a lot of fans in the chat for the book, a lot of people that have read it already. So anybody else have any quick questions before we let everybody go? Okay, awesome. It's astonishing but surprising how expensive a boat is. But I'm curious if there are other costs to a waterman, fees, insurance, etc., that us landlubbers who wrote that?
Yeah.
Oh, Mary Ella. So Mary Ella's question is basically, you went over a little bit, Lamont, about the expenses of getting a boat and all that other stuff. Is there any other costs to be a waterman, like fees or anything like that, that kind of aren't as obvious to people that aren't in the industry?
Well, the insurance most certainly, I'm not going to get into all of that, but the insurance, I run insurance for 6 months out of the year because the fishing obviously is seasonal. So the insurance is roughly $600 a month for the insurance. But as far as the fees and the maintenance of the boat, the fees is one thing, the maintenance is something else. The fees, there's not many fees because all of the Black captains' boats are housed in Queen Anne's County Public Landing, and thanks be to God that the public landing only charges so much money. Right now it's $750 a year, electric included, to put your boat there. So there's not a lot of fees as far as you go to one of the big marinas where it's $3,000 a month or something crazy, to just store your boat there. We do have accessibility to the county slits, and it's only $750 a year, and that's including electric. But the maintenance is another thing. You want to be careful because, like I said, the most reason that the expense is really high, you can have a problem with your engine, and it could be between $35,000 and $60,000 just to replace. My father had to replace the engine in his boat. It was $60,000 alone just for the engine. So, I mean, the maintenance is one thing, but the fees, there's not many local fees once you get your captain's license. You just got to get a DOT physical every year, and every 5 years renew your captain's license, which is only $100 some or whatever. But that's all of the fees. There's not many fees once your boat is paid for.
Yeah. Okay.
And,
Perfect.
one thing I would add is I think that Captain Lamont and Queen Anne's County government has been very fair and very kind to watermen, to Black watermen, but it's not many setups like they have in Queen Anne's County throughout the DMV, throughout the Chesapeake Bay. And one of the points is access to the waterways, because these aren't the kind of boats you can trailer.
Mhm.
And so access is another one of the barriers for people coming into the industry.
Right. Another question that we have really quick is, how many marine mechanics do you guys know that are African American? Do you guys know any?
One.
One? Okay. How old is he? How old is he?
Brandon is probably, he might be 40. I don't even know if he's 40.
Wow.
Right.
Maybe my son knows, but his name is Brandon Fisher,
Oh,
and
so-
he just got in, and he's probably the first and only Black mobile marine mechanic that I know.
Yes.
And Captain Vince just recently ran into him, I think, and
Mhm.
I'm not exactly sure of his age, but I know he may be 40, in his 40s. I'm not exactly sure, but he's a young guy,
Okay.
which is very good. I support him a lot.
Mechanics over in the Annapolis area, but they're in such high demand. But again, when we just talk about marine trades, we have schools that have VOTEC programs that are teaching marine mechanics. There are professional schools that teach marine mechanics. And so when I talk about careers, it could be land-based, it could be boat maintenance. We just want to show people a wide variety of careers in the industry, land-based and on water.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And someone in Alicia in the chat said he is 40. So so yeah. And then someone said, to piggyback on the boat mechanic question, do you know of other Black commercial fishermen in different fisheries around the country? Or are they just right here on maybe the East Coast or just the Chesapeake Bay?
Well, that I know of, there used to be all up and down the East Coast, but I don't know. Captain Vince may know somebody down in the Deal Island area, but I know one down in the Cambridge area, another Black captain, and one in the St. Michael's area. But I I know of no other in the Maryland, Chesapeake Bay fishery areas, period, that I know of.
Yeah, and
And
none
what
around the country or anything like,
I
other
don't
than
know of anywhere else in the country. I don't. I think Maryland has the majority of the Black captains. I'm almost sure of that.
Okay.
and what my response is, and that's why I tried to give the 30,000-foot view on the Chesapeake Bay, but I'll also take a worldwide view. And so we collaborate with captains in New Orleans, in Florida, the Georgia Sea Islands, the Detroit, the Great Lakes, the Houston area that's in the shrimping business. So again, part of the network that I travel in throughout the Caribbean basin and so forth. And so part of our model is to reach out and collaborate and share experiences. So my answer would be yes, I do. Yes, we do.
Awesome. All right. Well, if I don't see any more questions in the chat, I think we answered everybody's questions. So yeah, we'll just we'll end that here. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for coming out and for having this great conversation with us. I hope that you learned a lot. I hope that you have a lot to take away from this, and I hope that you can, share the things that you learned on this from Vince and from Lamont with others in your families and your communities and things like that, to keep pushing Black captains and African Americans on the Chesapeake forward. Again, all of the links for Minorities in Aquaculture, Off the Hook fishing charters, Box of the Chesapeake, and Chesapeake through Ebony Eyes are all in the chat. If anybody kind of wants, you know, to get in contact with any of us, definitely send me an email and I can, you know, kind of filter that through with Vince and Lamont. But again, thank you so much, Admiral Vince Leggett, Captain Lamont Wright. You know, you guys know I always say I appreciate you. I hope that you guys know that. And so thank you so much for doing this talk with me. I had a really great time. And I just really can't wait to see what we do next, because I think a lot of people are going to be surprised and shocked, but also a lot of people are going to be really impacted and beneficially for, you know, the things that we are going to do in the future. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank
And for your
you.
contribution
Thanks,
to the Chesapeake
everyone.
Bay.
Thanks, everyone, for
Thank
joining.
you.
Yeah.
And thank you, honey. Thank you. Great job.
Awesome. All right, everybody, have a
course.
great rest of your night. Talk to you
Always.
soon.
All right, Kat.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.